And we're joined by our guest, award-winning journalist Tim Pool. He is on Twitter at TimCast. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/TimCast. Of course, we had the major controversy a few weeks ago now. Trump coming out and saying, look at what happened last night in Sweden. It caused this big fracas in the media about the link between immigrants, mass immigration, and crime. Tim Pool, as a journalist, was going to visit anyway. I did not send him there, despite the claims of many in the mainstream media. In fact, I only donated about probably less than 10% for the funds that he eventually raised to go there. So I didn't send him there. I didn't tell him what to do. He went there as an impartial journalist to investigate the aspects that Trump raised that caused the controversy in the first place. Now, Tim, I mean, let's get into this. I think the most interesting aspect of your entire trip was probably not even the immigrant or the crime aspect itself, but the attitude of the media and the left in Sweden to simply investigating and discussing this issue. I mean, let's take it chronologically. When you first announced that you were taking this trip on Twitter, what kind of responses did you receive?
Don't go. I actually had journalists sending me messages saying to just donate all of the money. It's a fake news story. Donald Trump made it up. Don't go. And that blew my mind because I was like, well, if Donald Trump made it up where you think he did, shouldn't a journalist fact check that? Like, wouldn't everyone be excited about a journalist going to prove or disprove to do journalism? It was crazy to me that so many people were telling me not to do journalism.
And I mean, were they telling you to do that because they were concerned for your safety or because they seemed like they might be afraid of you discovering the truth?
No, they genuinely believed it was fake. It wasn't true. I mean, more than one journalist messaged me saying to donate the money to a refugee charity because it's fake. It's not a real thing. And that, first of all, that's illegal. You know, that would be felony fraud. And if you're so concerned that Donald Trump is making up fake stories, let a journalist go fact check that. I can't believe people would tell me not to do that.
I mean, it's amazing, but you know, if they were so confident that mass immigration was working out well in Sweden, that there are zero no-go zones in Sweden, you know, why wouldn't they want you to go there and prove it? I mean, what would they be afraid of? So you go there initially to Malmo. Not much happens in Malmo. You know, the Swedish press, the left-wing press, at least in Sweden, are generally happy with your performance, though still wary of your presence in the country, I would guess. Then you visit Rinkeby in Stockholm the day after they had the riots there. By the way, the contractors in Rinkeby are refusing to build a new police station in Stockholm because they set in Rinkeby in Stockholm because they say it's too dangerous. So tell us what happened in Rinkeby and how the Swedish press responded to it.
Well, let me start with Malmo. We went to these no-go areas. They're officially called problem areas by the police. No-go zone is just kind of a common term that people use. It's not official. Nothing happens. We walk around just fine. But in Stockholm, in Rinkeby, people start pulling up masks. They immediately start yelling at us. We had one small camera. It's about this big, if you can compare it to my head, I guess. We were pointing it down. We weren't aiming it at people. And a few police officers started getting agitated. They fanned me over and said, look at what the men around you are doing. You know, hey, if we leave here and you stay, things get really dangerous for you. And I was like, so do you think we should leave? And the cop says, well, you know, look, maybe if we arrest one person, there'll be 50 more people here with stones. It's probably smart if you were to leave now. And so then I said, okay, should you follow us out? And the cop says, I think that would be smart. And I said, okay. In the video I put out, I reference all of this. You know, here's what I tell people. You know, when you're on a plane, you don't get scared unless the flight attendant gets scared because they're the ones with the experience. If the cops are getting agitated and saying you need to go, it's smart if you were to leave, I mean, look, they're telling you to get out of there. They're telling you it's about to get really dangerous. They flat out said it could get really bad for us. The surprising thing to me, or I should say it's not surprising at all, is that the media started towing the line of the government. When the police denied anything happened, they said, oh, he's making that up. We never escorted him. The police issued a statement saying that I pulled out a camera and started filming young people, and then I followed the police out of Rinkeby, when in reality, Emily is the camera person, not me, and the police followed me out of Rinkeby. You can see it on my video. But look, most people in Sweden, not all, but a lot of them they believe the mainstream media. They just trust them.
I mean, this footage, we played it on InfoWars probably a few weeks ago now. You're basically walking in there. You're not directly filming anyone. What was it that triggered this hostile reaction? I mean, was it an immediate reaction, or were you there for a period of 20, 30 minutes? What triggered the hostile reaction from these migrants in this area?
We were there for about 5 minutes. It's, these young guys who are there are in gangs. Well, I'll put it this way. The conservative argument is that a lot of these guys are drug dealers, they are in gangs, and they don't want their faces filmed. The liberals in Sweden say it's because the media treats them like animals in a zoo and they don't like being filmed. Whatever the reason, if you go in the camera, you become a target immediately. There was a group of about 10 or 15 young men. They all started pulling up masks, and we noticed that, but the police got agitated. I assumed with the police there, nothing would happen. The police advised me otherwise. So when they advised us to leave, we did.
I mean, what's interesting to me, another aspect, is that, what does it say about a location that from the video, it seems like a communal shopping square, an outdoor shopping square. They have to have an almost permanent police presence there at all times. We don't even have that in London in most places, which is supposedly one of the #1 targets of terrorists. Yeah, in this little shopping area in this suburb of Stockholm, they have to have a police presence almost there, at all times. I mean, is it a no-go zone? Do you think it's a no-go zone?
Well, here's the problem, right? The official term "no-go zone" is a reference to war, where like a paramilitary group has taken over. So this is where the left in Sweden start arguing the semantics. I would say the police call it a problem area. And look, I've been around the world. I've been to some really crazy places. I was in Egypt when they pulled Morsi out of power. And you can walk around with a camera and nobody really gives you problems. In fact, Emily has done night crawling in Chicago in gang territory. And we were actually talking about how the funny difference in Chicago, in these really dangerous neighborhoods, if you bring out a camera, a lot of these gang members will ask you who you're with, what are you doing, but they're more excited about it. Like, oh, hey, who are you with? Are you with local news? Hey, film me. It's totally different here. These guys are just flat out like, they pull up masks, start yelling at you. And as we saw with the 60 Minutes crew and with Ami Horowitz, you can get attacked.
And of course, there's the terrorist aspect, which is, I talked about it earlier, several individuals which came out of some of these migrant suburbs were directly involved in the Paris massacre and the Brussels bombing, at least in the plotting, the mastermind of that. So they want to hide their faces, as he said, mainly for crime reasons, because a lot of them are gang members, but also because of that. You did a number of interviews while you were out there with Swedish media. Did you notice anything odd about the translations of those interviews when they were published or aired on television?
Oh, yeah, we all know this one. One of the first interviews I did was with Swedish state television. It's called SVT. They actually showed up at my hotel without telling me. They asked me to do an interview. I said that Paul Joseph Watson is a right-wing Trump supporter, but in the translations, they added the word extremist in the subtitles. And this caused a huge, here's what bothers me. The far-right parties and the actual Nazis in this country started using my face as proof that the mainstream media was lying. And so that makes me angry because I had nothing to do with, I get it. They're not accusing me of doing it, but now I'm like this symbol. And then when I went on the show Opinion Live, which is a really big show apparently, they didn't translate my rebuttal to the police statement. So the police issued a statement that was obviously false. You can just watch my video, know what they said isn't true. And when I explained, the mistakes the spokesperson said, the host didn't translate me. She just said, we're talking about what happened in Rinkeby, and the police say what he's saying didn't happen. They just totally disregarded what I said for the... Well, I will say this, though. The average Swedish person, young person, speaks English, so they tried to pull a fast one, but I don't think it was very well thought out.
So they basically omitted some of your statements on the television broadcast. They put up the word extremist after you described me as right-wing. That was completely fraudulent. So again, let's get into what the people said, because you interviewed a lot of the locals there. You had a psychologist, a clinical professional psychologist, who was talking about some of these issues. How did you approach him? What happened with that?
Uh, well, I'll try not to give away too much because these people really are scared about their identities being revealed. But we were put in touch with a clinical psychologist, very very smart person. I was really impressed. I mean, the whole interview it's only a little bit longer, but this person was brilliant. The crazy thing to me is that they can, as an expert in the field of psychology, can tell me how social justice and identity politics can be pushed to the extreme, and then it creates self-censorship, it creates social pressures and censorship and shunning and these horrible problems. But even they want it to be blurred. And if you'll notice in the video, almost the entire screen is blurred. You can't see their face because they're wearing a hood. They asked for all of this. I had some journalists criticize me for hamming it up. Oh, you don't need to blur him that much. And I am telling you right now, this person, as we were leaving, they said to me, please, your life is in my hands. And so we did what they asked and made sure the entire screen was blurred, and we dropped we changed their voice and you couldn't see their face. That's how scared they were of people finding out who they were.
And it's not as if this was some right-wing extremist who was making controversial statements. This was a clinical psychologist simply talking about the issues and the problems that are being caused with mass immigration, and that's it. And yet he was so paranoid about appearing on camera. Even with his back to the camera, he still wanted his physical outline blurred. And you know, when you announced you were going, yeah, go ahead.
Hold on. I wouldn't call him paranoid. One of the biggest newspapers in Sweden is called Expressen, and they actually go to the homes of people who have posted comments online and question them about their opinions. So there are people, actually I'll give you an example. There was an old man just a few days ago who posted on Facebook, I believe. He said, Christians, homosexuals, transsexuals, Jews will not be safe until all Muslims are deported. Now, in my opinion, yeah, that's an extreme opinion. But by all means, say that if that's what you think, that's whatever. He's facing up to 2 years in prison now. They're charging him with hate speech. This newspaper, Expressen, has gone, they actually, I guess you could call it a hack. They hacked anonymous accounts to find out where these people lived, and they show up at their houses with a camera to post their faces in the newspaper. And this happened to somebody not too long ago. And they sued, saying you can't go after private individuals like this for their opinions. And the court ruled in favor of the newspaper. So this guy's not paranoid. He knows exactly what they'll do to him if they find out who he is.
No, I mean, it's incredible. You've even had Swedish politicians who talk about crime statistics and their link between, ethnicity of criminals, and they get hit with hate crimes charges. This is the atmosphere in Sweden. I mean, I was bombarded with messages from Swedes telling me things about Sweden. They live in these areas. So I was, well, do you want to talk to Tim Pool? He's there. There was a Lebanese shopkeeper in Malmo who is an immigrant himself, owns a store. He's got his kids in the local school. He wants to move back to Lebanon because he says there are ISIS sympathizers in the school. You received a ton of messages from people, with a myriad of different stories, but hardly any of them were prepared to go on the record, correct?
None of them were. We talked for a week straight to someone, I don't want to give away too much information, but somebody who works in these areas dealing with integration, who told us terrifying things, and they were so terrified, they actually said that my country is full of cowards and I'm one of them. And I just don't even know what to say to that. We got to the point where we convinced someone after 3 days to go on the record, somebody who works in government, and then a day later they just pulled out, dropped it. They said, I'm sorry, I can't do this, and just cut off contact. People really are scared to speak up in Sweden. It's strange, I mean, especially for an American.
Absolutely incredible. And it basically ended with at least one Swedish journalist referring to you for simply trying to impartially investigate the issue as a journalist. They referred to you as a threat to democracy. I mean, what does it tell you about Sweden's attitude towards dissent on this issue, that they would label you a threat to democracy?
And that was from Swedish radio, so that's kind of like NPR here. I will say someone else wrote an op-ed apologizing. So there's this strange internal debate happening now. I will say this, the facade is collapsing. For a long time, Sweden has tried to maintain this image of, utopian society. But when I was there, shortly maybe a week or so ago, the Uppsala Police Department acknowledged that crime was up 80%, sexual assaults were up 60%, and a local MP came out and said it is a roving gang of unaccompanied minor refugees who are assaulting women and robbing people in broad daylight. So they're starting now to come clean and recognize that they didn't have a plan. They can't deal with this. And, you know, although it is a relatively small amount of the total refugees they brought in, they are seeing, I'll say this, Donald Trump was right. He said they would see problems. They're seeing problems they never thought possible. And that's what they're starting to recognize, that when you have 90 unaccompanied minors who are refugees coming in and surrounding women, assaulting people, you know, committing sexual assaults, they didn't think that was possible. And now it's a reality for a lot of people in Sweden.
I mean, it comes down to this. You know, you can get down to the weeds and pass the issue of, is it newly arrived migrants committing most of the crimes? Did the rape skyrocket after they redefined rape? The stats show that it actually skyrocketed from 2014 onwards after that whole redefinition, so that doesn't really apply. But, you know, you can argue those 2 points. What you can't argue is the fact that Sweden Democrats, which was a relatively obscure party, is now the second biggest party in Sweden, could become the first. Their main issue, of course, is immigration. You know, the cop who blew the whistle, Peter Springer, on Facebook. His Facebook page got 250,000 likes in a matter of weeks for a small country like Sweden. Those two examples alone show you, Tim, that Swedes must be incredibly concerned about this issue. So how long can they go on burying it?
Well, here's something funny we encountered when we interviewed the mayor of the city of Södertälje. So this is a small town, or it's a city south of Stockholm. This mayor has been critical of a law they call the EBO. This law allows any refugee to show up in Sweden, present an address, and they can go stay anywhere in that city. Södertälje has taken in more refugees than any other city up until 2015. So the interesting thing to me is the mayor there is a social democrat, the leading party. It's very, very left. And she's critical of this law, one of the few politicians who is critical of the law. Södertälje has had gang problems. It has almost 50% migrants. They actually had a situation where gangs pulled up to the police station and fired an AK-47 into the police department.
Tim, hold that thought. We got a break coming up. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. You know, an interesting aspect to the whole Sweden situation, the terror risk, that whole narrative is a relatively small part of this. The main issue is the crime, is the sexual assault, is the intimidation, is the fear that these unassimilated populations bring. And not all migrants get into the life of crime and gangs and all that kind of stuff. But this is a very real problem in these migrant areas of Sweden. Trump was right. They're having big problems. And for the Swedish media to claim that it's completely hunky-dory, cultural enrichment, multiculturalism is working is a complete lie. But they're so terrified of anyone countering that narrative. And you can see that in the response to Tim Pool. The other aspect to this was, you know, I was called basically a coward for posting an article with migrants in Malmo directing fireworks horizontally at people's faces. And the response to that from some leftists on Twitter was, oh, you're afraid of fireworks. Well, yeah, I would be concerned about people aiming fireworks horizontally at my face. And this is the kind of behavior that we're now seeing in these migrant suburbs. And this is why it's a major problem. Tim, before the break, we've got a couple of minutes left, but just finish up with your comments. You were cut off before the break there.
Basically, there's a mayor of a small town who is critical of the law that allows migrants to live wherever they want. The reason is that they all choose to live in this one town that it's called Södertälje. That's where she's the mayor. So she refuses to acknowledge that there's crime or that there are issues coming from refugees and migrants. But publicly, she will criticize the law that allows her town to see more migrants than anywhere else. That says to me she's well aware of the problem, but she can't publicly admit it.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, just to summarize, you went there as an impartial journalist. You went there to tell it like it was, and people were afraid of that even before you arrived, and to me that said everything. But just rounding up, tell people where they can find your work on Twitter and YouTube.
I'm on Twitter at Timcast, and it's youtube.com/TIMCAST.
All right, and we'll be sure to include those links in the video description when this goes up on YouTube. Tim Poole, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Click the link below to subscribe to the channel, and for more breaking news go to Infowars.com. The Making of the President 2016, how Donald Trump orchestrated a revolution. This is the untold story of how Trump defied all the odds to win the presidency. From former Trump confidant Roger Stone, the inside scoop of how Trump rocked the establishment. Get your signed copy of The Making of the President right now at InfoWarsStore.com.